Kia ora and welcome back to Wellywood Wargaming. I'm your host Damon, and in this episode of Sump Banter we're going to be talking about exotic beasts. Now I've been meaning to do this one for a little bit of a while, so apologies that it's been so long. I have already done brutes quite a while ago, but I thought exotic beasts would be the natural next place to go. Now exotic beasts in Necromunda, if you're not familiar with, that means pets basically. So there are numerous types of pets now that we've got all the extra gang books and stuff. There are also the Beastmaster ones, which we're not actually going to be talking about in here because I did that in a previous video. But I think we've got 17 different types of pets here. Some of them are gang specific, some of them are illegal, and others that you just get at the trading post as per normal. But what are pets? What are they used for in Necromunda? I suppose that's worth talking about first. Pets are usually overpriced, sort of extravagant items that you can have for your fighters. Of course, it's only champions and leaders that can have pets at all, and they have a maximum number that they can have of each pet type as well, depending on the type of pet that it is. There are a couple of rules that I just need to pinpoint before we talk about the individual pets themselves, of course. Like I said, they're only available to champions and leaders, or leaders and champions, and there's a limitation per type of pet, which we're going to go through shortly. The other thing is that they're purchased as war gear as well, so they don't count as a weapon or anything, they are counted as war gear for that fighter's fighter card. Now they follow all the normal rules for fighters, however they do have the following exceptions, so it's worth just highlighting that now. So they don't count towards your crew size, they count as war gear for the fighter, so even though it looks like you've got a shit ton of models on the table, if your leader's got 3 pets, your leader just counts as 1 fighter. Now that works the same for bottle checks as well, so should those pets go out of action during a game of Necromunda, they don't count towards your bottle roll either. You also gain extra group activation for that as well. Now that group activation is just for your pets. It does mean that you can still group activate with other friendly fighters as well, so say for example your leader has group activation 2, he also has group activation pet as a sort of separate thing. So your fighters with pets have to go at the same time in the same activation as your pets basically. So your pets might go first and then your leader, or then your leader or your pets, it's up to you. But how you do that is entirely up to you, but you still get your your group activations with your other fighters as well. Now most pets, I'm going to say this, need to constantly remain within 3 inches of the owning fighter. So there are a couple of exceptions to that, but that depends on the actual individual pet that we're talking about. But generally speaking, 3 inches is the maximum range they have to stay within of the owning fighter. If for any reason they do go out of that 3 inches, they need to take a cool check. If they fail that cool check, they will become broken, and they, instead of running towards cover or running away from the fighter or the danger or whatever, they'll run back to the leader or the owner of the pet. I hope that's clear. Now they don't gain any XP for rallying. That's another thing that's worth mentioning as well. You can't just deliberately make them break and rally and gain XP that way. You can't farm XP in breaking pets. So that's a big no-no. Just remember that you can't do that. They gain experience like gangers, and they can also become specialists, and each of them have their own sort of unique skill trees should they become specialists as well. And they can't take any extra equipment, weapons, war gear, nothing like that. They just come as is. Some of them can be upgraded, I think, but maybe not the pets actually, maybe just brutes that I'm thinking about. But they can be taken captive, and they can be sold as well. However, they can't be used to work mines and things like that in territories and whatnot too. That's the sort of in and out of pets in general, and exotic beasts should we call them. Now we're going to go ahead and get into the actual specific types that you get in Necromunda. Now like I said, there are 17 of these, so bear with me. I'll try and put timestamps on all of these as well so you can skip straight to them. But let's go ahead and have a look at the exotic beasts available in Necromunda. So in no particular order, we're going to go and have a look at the exotic beasts available to your gangs in Necromunda, whether gang specific or non. The Sheenbirds are available only to House Cawdor. They are House Cawdor's specific house pet. They only have 1, and those are Sheenbirds. Here are the stats that you can see here. Now Sheenbirds, obviously they are 90 credits, which is a little bit expensive. To be honest, I'm going to probably tell you that most of these are very expensive, because I do think that a lot of the exotic beasts in the game are overcosted generally. Some of them are too cheap, but most of them are quite expensive. 90 credits for a Sheenbird is very expensive if you ask me, compared to a ganger. However, the stats are as follows. And they fly, of course, so they have flight, which does mean that they can move over difficult terrain, they can go up and down levels very easily, and traverse the board in a much easier fashion than many other fighters can do. They also have a couple of other special rules as well. The first one is called Bait. Now this one, when the owning fighter activates, make a willpower test for the owning fighter. If failed, this fighter must attempt to charge the closest enemy fighter. So, interesting one. I mean, to be honest, these guys are going to be charging a lot of the time anyway, because that's kind of what they're for screening. But it's kind of annoying when you do fail that test, because it means that you just can't control them as much as you'd like to. The next special rule that Sheenbirds have is Rake Away. Now, Rake Away, at the end of the activation, if the owner is active or pinned, a willpower test can be made. If passed, make a free move simple action or retreat basic action if engaged directly towards the owning fighter. So pretty cool. You can kind of use them like a feathered boomerang, I suppose, in a way, should they survive. But they're not very tough, as you can see. They've only got toughness 2. They haven't got any armor, and they're not particularly dangerous in close combat either. To be honest, the Sheenbird, I would say, I'm going to give all these a rating. I would say the Sheenbird probably gives me like a D, maybe. It's not a very good exotic beast, and it's a shame because that's the only one that Cawdor actually get to. So that's the Sheenbird. They are quite fast. They do have 2 attacks, as worth mentioning as well. 2 attacks is pretty good when they're charging. That does give them 3 attacks. So they can certainly hurt stuff, but they're not very tough. That's the main problem with these guys, I think. Moving on now. The next one, and this is a bit of a weird one, is the Cephalopod Spectre. Now there are 2 pets available for House Delac, and this is one of them. This one is 100 credits, which is incredibly expensive. It's basically a floating octopus, sort of cyber octopus, which is kind of cool, sounds cool anyway. And these of course fly as well. Now the thing with these guys is they're not very tough, they're not very competent in close combat, they are average speed, but they come with basically a shock stave, so they've got a versatile shock weapon, which does make them slightly more of a threat in close combat, I would say, because shock is quite a good trait to have on any weapon. And like I said, they do fly as well, so the same thing as the Sheenbird there too. Now these have got 3 extra special rules here, aside from flight. The first one is a sensor array. So these guys, these octopuses, if within 3 inches of the owner makes an intelligence check, for any reason, you get to roll an extra d6 and pick the dice to discard. So you've got a much higher chance of passing intelligence checks. So cephalopods are really good for having around your leader or your champion if you want to open loot crates, you want to open security doors, specific scenarios that do revolve around intelligence. Now, intelligence isn't a stat that we use a huge amount in Necromunda, but it is still kind of important. The thing is, though, to remember here that Delac do have slightly higher intelligence than other gangs generally, so it does make the cephalopods slightly less valid, if you ask me, on a Delac gang. The next one is threat response. This is quite cool. When the owner is taken out of action, all enemy fighters within d6 of this pet suffer a strength 1 automatic hit with seismic, so it means they're always pinned, regardless of if they have nerves of steel as well, because seismic does negate nerves of steel. And no save roll can be made if the wound is a 6, so again it's shock there too. But that's pretty cool. It's only strength 1, but it does auto pin everybody who's around you, so that can be quite useful, but you're counting on the owner getting taken out of action to use that, so it's kind of yeah, it's not too common that you can be using that one. The next one and the last one is Watchdog as well, or Watch-Ock. Watch-Ock? Watch-Pod. If the owner is a sentry, attackers can be spotted outside the vision arc, add +1 modifier to spotting. A 1 before modifiers always fails. So again, very situational. You're only going to be playing a few scenarios that actually have sentries and stuff. There aren't that many in the game. There's 130 scenarios, and I think only a handful actually have the sentry rules in them. Having said that, again, if you do play those types of scenarios regularly, then the cephalopod is more valid, I'd say. Again, same with the intelligence and stuff. So he kind of is very, very good in those particular types of scenarios, but otherwise 100 credits for something that is not in any way powerful in any other way is definitely a rip-off, if you ask me. So that's the Cephalopod Spectre. Moving on now, we have the Cherub Servitor. Now this one is specific to Redemptionists. These are only available to Redemptionists priests, pretty much. And they are what we love most about the Grimdark 40k lore, is they are floating babies with wings and bionic eyes and stuff and skulls for faces. Very, very cool. I've always loved the image of these Cherub Servitors. They've always creeped me out a little bit. I remember seeing some artwork back in the day. I'll think of a Dark Angels John Blanche piece, and there was tons of cherubs floating around. I just thought it was really, really cool. But the Cherub Servitor is 55 credits, and they're only available to Caller and Redemptionists. I believe they're only for Outlaw gangs as well, but correct me if I'm wrong there. I haven't actually got those rules in front of me right now, but here are the stats for the Cherub Servitor. They are by no means a fighter. They are definitely more of a useful tool, and you'll see why when I talk about the special rules just now. So again, these guys fly, of course. They've got little angel wings, and they are floating babies. And they've got several special rules here. The first one is that they have is a bodyguard rule. So if they're within 2 inches of the lead of the owner, and the owner gets hit by a ranged attack, the hit and all its effects can be transferred onto this fighter. Really, really cool. It does mean that these cherubs, you're probably going to go through them quite often, and they're 55 credits, so they're quite expensive, but they're really good to have on a leader. I had one on my Redemptionist leader in my Outcast gang. Pretty cool. Yeah, it worked quite often, just to take all of the hits. So that's a good one. The next one is they have Focus of Faith as well, so you can re-roll 1 die when generating faith dice in the end phase per friendly fighter with the special rule on the battlefield, not seriously injured or broken. So again, they generate more faith dice, which is pretty cool, because faith dice are pretty important in the Caller and Redemptionist mechanics, I would say. That's part of the reason why you're going to be playing those games. The other thing is they're stealthy, so they're -1 to hit in general. Targeted by ranged attacks, not up close and personal and close combat, of course, but just by ranged attacks, but still quite nice to have that extra -1. And they're also a small target as well, so they're never hit by stray shots, which is also quite cool. So if you put them in front of your owner or whatever, they don't get hit by straight shots. So that's another thing to have as well. Now the main thing we're going to talk about here though is that they're nimble, so they've got a 4+ invulnerable save, which is really, really cool. Basically like a displacer field without any negatives. Now this is really important, because if you double that up with the hit and all its effects taken from the bodyguard thing, it does mean that half the time they're surviving and soaking up that damage. The other half the time though, 55 credits and they're probably dead. Is it worth it though? I think for 55 credits, the Cherub Servitor is pretty good. It's not something you're going to want to get early on in a campaign, but later on in a campaign when people have got very powerful heavy weapons and whatnot, they're worth having just to keep your characters alive a bit more. Remember, you can have 0 to 3 of these on one guy as well, so pretty useful, but again, it is quite bloaty at 55 credits. I do think they're very good though. So that's that one. Moving on to the second Delac pet, because for some reason Delac gets special treatment here and they get an extra pet. They get the Psychotheric Worm. Now the Psychotheric Worm is unlike any other pet. You get 0 to 2 of them, and they are 70 credits each, which is quite expensive again. Here are the stats for them. So they're pretty fast. They're okay in close combat. They have effectively a flensing knife for their jaws, so they've got -1 and rending to their attacks, which is pretty cool. They've only got 1 attack and 1 wound, and they're not very tough either. However, these guys don't fly, they do the opposite, they burrow. So they can pretty much do the same, but they go under terrain instead. So they can move freely under impassable terrain if movement is sufficient to pass through it completely. Really, really cool. They've also got a long leash as well. So different to what I said with the 3-inch rule for most exotic beasts, the Psychotheric Worm can be 12 inches away, or up to 12 inches away, which is really, really cool. And that's why they are so much better than so many other pets as well. But the main reason why you're going to get these guys, is that they are a psychoteric node. What that means is if you're using psychoteric powers, you can channel your psychoteric powers through the Psychotheric Worm and thus increase the range of your psychoteric powers, which most of the time are very close range. Pretty cool, but while you have this pair active or pinned and not seriously injured, the owner can channel weird powers through this fighter. Just reading the special rule here, the Psyker suffers any perils of the warp as normal, so the node doesn't, but the Psyker still has to suffer perils of the warp if you roll that double 1 or double 6. But the range, distance and line of sight is measured from this pet. So like I said, the actual psychoteric power goes from the pet instead of the owner. So you can pop this thing up and kick off some really nasty psychoterica right next to people without risk so much to your owning fighter. Really cool, that one. So I think for 70 credits they are definitely worth it, and very, very, very good to have again later on in a campaign with Delact, but very, very viable. I can't see anybody using Psychotheric without them effectively, to be honest, most of the time. That's my 2 cents on the Psychotheric Worm anyway. So the next one here we're going to talk about is specific to House Goliath. This is their house pet, and that of course is the Sump Croc. Now the Sump Croc is one of the better pets if you ask me. It's 130 credits, and here are the stats. It's very slow, it's very tough, it's similar to a Goliath in a lot of ways. It's got strength 4, toughness 4, but the key thing here that's quite different to a lot of other pets is it's got 2 wounds and 2 attacks, which is really nice. So much more survivable, much more durable than other pets, that's for sure. It doesn't fly, it doesn't burrow, it is quite slow, but it's very, very good at just soaking up a bit of damage. Now, it has also got an armor save too, which adds to its toughness. So it's effectively got mesh armor with a 5-up save. It's got scaly hide basically. And it's got ferocious jaws too, which counts kind of as a flinching knife in terms of its stats. Now this only has one special rule. It's got a rule called countercharge, which can be done once per round, or once per phase I suppose, if all conditions are true. Firstly, it has to be active, and second, the enemy has to charge the owner. So this is a countercharge movement. After the enemy movement, interrupt the activation by performing a charge, double action against the enemy fighter, including the fight basic action. Finally, the enemy can continue the charge action and make attacks as normal. So effectively, your opponent declares a charge, but then you get to cancel it by charging in and hopefully finishing them off. Really, really cool. Again though, you have to look at the gang that this is with, right? Of course, it's only Goliath champions and Goliath leaders that are going to have Sump Crocs. Goliath leaders and Goliath champions are close combat beasts. It's not often that you're going to want to charge them, right? In your right mind. Unless you're a Goliath yourself or an Ogrin or a Corpse Grinder, you're not going to want to get stuck in a fist fight with a Goliath leader too often. So do think about that, so that you're probably not going to be using countercharge much. It's more just there as a deterrent. You're not going to be using it too much, but it is a really good deterrent, I would say. But yeah, 130 credits, I like them. I think they're really good. Again, they're quite expensive for what they are, but the fact that they've got 2 wounds and high toughness and stuff, and they can damage stuff, they're pretty powerful. We've also got a weapon skill of 3+ there as well. So they're definitely no slouches in close combat, and they can certainly tear you a new one if you're not careful. So that's the Sump Croc. I'd give that one a, well, do you know what? We'll go back through all of them and I'll give them a rating, I think. But the Sump Croc definitely for me is one of the better ones. Moving on now to House Escher. Now they've got 2 types of pets, and they're both cats. The first one is the Fear Cat, or the Fear Cat, or the, I never know how to say this one, but PHYRR cat. These ones are 120, and they are really, really good. Now, the Fur Cat has much higher movement than most of the other pets. It's movement 7, which is really, really good. So you've got a 14-inch double move there. They're not very tough. They've only got 1 wound. They're not very survivable, but they've got an excellent initiative and 2 attacks too. They've also got sharp talons too, which is pretty cool. Which kind of count as a mono hook if you want to look at the rules for those. Now these guys have got 2 special rules as well. The first one is that they're independent. So instead of remaining within 3 inches, similar to the Psychotheric Worm, these guys get 9 inches on their leash. So they can be 9 inches away from the owning fighter, which is excellent. And they always land on their feet. So they're -2 strength from any damage that's from taking falling damage, which is pretty cool too. However, with an initiative of a 2+, they're not going to be falling much anyway. So for 120 credits, they're pretty good. I think their claws have got pulverize or something off the top of my head. I had 1 single Fur Cat somehow take out an Ambot in 1 round of combat charging. So I don't know how that happened. Maybe I'll have to go and look at that again, but it happened in a game. I had a Fur Cat take out an Ambot, no saves were made. Pulverize or rending came into play there somewhere and took out my Ambot. I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure that happened. But Fear Cats, I think they're very, very good. Again, 120 credits is quite a lot, but just that 9-inch range, having them roaming around elsewhere and outflanking people is really, really useful. The next Escher house-specific one comes with your Wild Runners, and this is the Felix Cat. These guys are kind of like a cross between cats and lizards. They're toxic little annoying things, and these guys are 50 credits, so much, much cheaper than most of the other exotic beasts here. They're movement 6, so they're still pretty fast. They've got a decent or average weapon skill of 4 up. And they've also got 2 attacks as well, which is pretty good for something that's so cheap. Terrible mental stats, mind. But they've got 2 special rules as well. The first being Venomous Bite. So 6 is to hit before modifiers count as toxin, which is pretty cool, especially on multi-wound targets. But it's only 6s, it's not just toxin all the time. The other thing is they have Reckless on their attacks as well. So if you've got a bunch of these in combat with one target, they're probably going to rip each other to shreds as well. So be mindful of that and really think tactically about how you use these Felix Cats. I would say that Felix Cats on Wild Runners are an excellent screening tool. What I mean by that is just to get in the way of things and be annoying and clog up the battlefield and act as deterrents. They're really annoying. They can coup de grace stuff. They just get in the way of things really, and you don't really care if they die too much. There is a tactics card that comes with House Escher that gives you 1 free Wild Runner with 3 cats, I believe. Fantastic tactics card that I suggest every Escher player puts in their deck, because it does mean that you can have this Felix Cat herd or pride, I suppose, with a Wild Runner and use them with Reckless Abandon and not really care about the consequences of them dying and stuff. So you can use them with a bit more freedom in that sense as well. But that's the Felix Cat. Okay, still on the cat tip here. This one is not a house-specific cat. Actually, this is the first of the bunch, which is actually illegal. So this is an illegal pet, and it's illegal 14, so it's really, really hard to get hold of. However, there are some brackets in the Law and Misrule campaign that give you a free one of these, or a grapple hawk, I believe. But this is the Gyrinx cat, or the Gyrinx cat. I'm not really sure how you say this one either. But you can only have one of them on a fighter as well, and they are 120 credits. So they're very expensive, again, for what they do. However, stats are as follows. Very weak, not very strong, not very survivable. However, they're movement 7, so they're very, very fast. And they're stealthy as well, so they're -1 to hit because they're extra small targets too. Which is pretty cool. -1 to hit, targeted by ranged attacks generally. Now the reason why you take these guys is because they're psychic. They are psychic cats. Pretty cool in its own regard. Now these came out before the book of the Outcast, so you could talk to your arbitrator about picking, maybe picking a psychic power table to use with these guys, but as written, rules as written, they get not a great choice of weird powers. Now you've got 6 to choose from here, but you don't get to choose. You randomize at the start of the battle which of these 6 powers you get, and they get that 1 power for the rest of the battle. The first one is Assail, which is basically a ranged attack, and you can push fighters off ledges, things like that. Now this cat's only got a ballistic skill of 4+, so it's not particularly great on that, but it's not a bad one. The next one is Flame Blast. So Flame Blast is, off the top of my head, makes your close combat attacks have blaze, which is not very useful on a fighter that's not very fighty. The third one is Freeze Time, which is a double. Freeze Time is awesome because in a 12-inch bubble around you, if you pull it off, everybody, including friendly fighters, only activates once instead of twice. So that's a real clutch move that you can do on people, but it is quite situational. The fourth one is Weapon Jinx, which is one of my favourite weird powers in the game. It's fantastic. It's also a simple, meaning that you can do it twice. Weapon Jinx forces your enemy to do a weapon check, an ammo check, and when they've got scarce weapons and stuff, doing that is fantastic. There's also quite a bit of range on that. I think it might be 12 to 18 inches. So Weapon Jinx, definitely the one that you're going to want out of all of these. However, the next one's also very good, which is Terrify. Now you force your enemy to make a cool check, I believe, or a willpower check. Otherwise they are broken, which is also very, very cool and disruptive. And the last one is Quickening. So Quickening is probably the weakest in the bunch for this cat, because it just means that you get faster and you get slightly better attacks and stuff. But again, this isn't a fighty cat, so you're not really going to use it for that. I'd say my choice is there. You're going to hope to get Weapon Jinx or Terrify. Those are both great. Freeze Time's also useful, and so is Assail in certain situations too. But for 120 credits, I quite like the Gyrinx cat. It's very fluffy and fun, pun intended. And that is the first illegal pet that we're going to talk about there. Now moving on to the sort of spider in the room, and that's the Cyberachnid. Now the Cyberachnid is Van Saar's unique exotic beast, and of course it is a cyber spider. These are 75 credits, and the stats are as follows. We've got movement 6. They're very weak, so they've only got strength and toughness 2. They've only got 1 wound, and they've only got 1 attack. However, the reason why you take these guys is that they come with what's called a web projector, which means a built-in web weapon. Now, web weapons are incredibly powerful. A web pistol is 90 credits, and pretty damn good. These guys get a slightly toned down version of a web pistol being only strength 2. However, if you wound with web, then you're seriously injured. You know, it's really that simple. Web is incredibly powerful. You don't have to worry about ballistic skill because it's a template too. They're also horrific, so they can't be captured. And they're fear-inducing too, because people are just generally arachnophobic, as I am. I was in here the other day in a meeting and I saw a huge tunnel web spider, New Zealand tunnel web, just kind of crawling over the books there, so I had to sort of take my laptop elsewhere. But there's tons in this garage, I've got to be honest. Although in Australia it's going to be even worse, so there we go, got to get used to that. Anyway, cyberarachnids, moving on. Fear-inducing, so they have the fearsome skill, basically. And while active and within 3 inches of its owner, the skill also applies to the owner too. So fearsome, if you don't know what that skill does, if someone declares a charge or fight action against you, they have to take a willpower check, otherwise they don't get to do that action. It's pretty cool, it's similar to some of the corpse grinder masks. It's not terrifying, but fearsome. Fearsome doesn't involve shooting mechanics, it's just close combat, I believe. That's the cyberarachnid, and the worst thing to this is you can have a maximum of 3 of these on one guy, so 3 web projectors, but I find them a real nuisance. You know, they're not often wounding stuff, but when they do, it's really bad, but they're just pinning you all the time as well. However, they can run out of the web projector as well. And they've got clamber as well, so it does mean that they can climb with no penalty as well. That is the cyberarachnid there. Moving on now to everybody's favourite doggo, and that is the Cyber Mastiff for House Orlok. You can have 3 of these on one fighter, and they're pretty good. The only problem with the Cyber Mastiff is they're massively overcosted at 100 credits. Now 100 credits for something which is, you know, average movement, slightly better weapon skill, average strength, toughness, wounds, initiative and attacks, and average mental stats as well is a complete rip-off. I think these should be 50 credits and they would be worth taking. They've got 2 special rules though. The first one is Watchdog. If the owner is a sentry, attackers can be spotted outside the vision arc, same as the Cephalopod Spectre, exactly the same rule there. You get +1 modifier to spotting. And they've also got Loyal Protector as well, which while standing, active and engaged and within 3 inches of its owner, enemy fighters may not make coup de grace against the owner, which is really cool actually. So if someone charges your owner, takes the owner out, they can't actually coup de grace them. So and they can still assist, you know, should your Cyber Mastiff still be there in the end phase, they can assist recovery as well perhaps, depending on what's going on, the situation. But that's quite a cool special rule, but for 100 credits it's just not good enough, to be honest. The next one, very, very similar, is the Hacked Cyber Mastiff. So this one is still 100 credits, but this one's illegal, but it's available to any gang. So any gang can have a Hacked Cyber Mastiff. They've got exactly the same stats as the normal Cyber Mastiff, and their jaws kind of have a flensing knife as well, which is rending, I believe. Now they've got Glitchy, which is a terrible rule. So in each activation, roll a 2+ or gain Insanity. Now Insanity is really, really nasty. If you succumb to it, it's really hard to get out of with the current rules as written as well. So that, for me, for 100 credits and the opportunity to go insane 1 in 6 each turn is just terrible. They've also got another special rule called Tenacious as well. So they haven't got the same special rules as the normal Cyber Mastiff. The Hacked Cyber Mastiff is not as good. If taken out of action in a round it has not yet activated in, it's not removed until after it's activated. So you get an extra activation once you've been taken out, kind of, which is quite cool as well. But again, for 100 credits, absolute rip-off if you ask me, not good at all. The last doggo that we're going to talk about though, in contrast, is probably the best pet here, if you ask me, for its value anyway. So 70 credits here, and these are only for enforcers, and they are the hard case Cyber Mastiff. So these ones have been slightly made into more machine than doggo. Now they've got average movement, again pretty good weapon skill, but they've got toughness 4 instead of 3, which is much better. And they've got 2 attacks instead of 1 as well. So already the stats are far better than the general Orlok Cyber Mastiff, or even the Hacked Cyber Mastiff as well. The stats are far better and they're cheaper. They've also got a special skills as well. The first one is Tenacious, again, which is the same as what we just spoke about. So if they get taken out of action, they get to activate again if they haven't activated. And they also get Loyal Protector as well, so you can't coup de grace within 3 inches. And they get Faithful Protector, which is when activated, if the owner is engaged and within 6 inches, this fighter can immediately move into base to base with any fighters. Engaging the owner counts as a free action, so pretty cool. But yeah, for 70 credits, suddenly you have something that's actually worth taking. And it's definitely one of the reasons why you'd play Enforcers, quite honestly, because they're that good. There's some cool models for the Cybermastiff as well. You can get the Surveillance model from Forge World, or you can actually go to Artel, which is a Russian company. They do some pretty cool Cyber Doggos as well. There's also the Cyber Doggo that I use from the Orlok special character from Forge World as well. Can't remember his name. Slate Medina, I believe. I use his dog, his Mastiff, as my hard case as well. So those are all the cats and doggos. Moving on now. All right, getting through it. Now we've got the special ones. The ones that a lot of people have problems with, the ones that need house ruling generally, and that is the Psychic Familiar. Now the Psychic Familiar and the Chaos Familiar, both the stats are the same here. These guys are 25 credits. Obviously the Psychic Familiar is only available for Genestealer Cult, and the Chaos Familiar is only available for Chaos Cult. However, you know that you can corrupt or taint house gangs to be Genestealer infected or Chaos corrupted, which does give you access to these as well. Now 25 credits is absolutely nothing for something that is this powerful. Now these guys, as you can see, the stats are similar to Cherub, so they're pretty weak. You're not going to want to get them in combat or anything. However, they're very, very useful. They've both got Catfall and Clamber. I'm talking about both of these familiars because they are basically the same. Now, they have a 3+ unmodifiable by AP save, which is fantastic in its own right. They have a 4+ save against Blast as well, which is pretty cool. And the real reason why you're going to get these guys is because they have a special rule called Omen of Fortune, which we have house ruled. And I think most people should house rule, because I think as rules as intended should be what I'm going to be talking about. But as written, Omen of Fortune. While within 3 inches of its owner, the owner may pass a willpower test to avoid being hit once per activation. Now it says once per activation, that is the house rule. Rules as written, I don't believe it does have that once per activation, but really, really powerful. You make the test immediately after a successful roll to hit has been made against the fighter. The attacks counts as being missed. Place templates and blast as normal for the purposes of determining hits against other models, but the owner is assumed to have dodged clear. When we used to use these, we didn't have that house rule in effect, and they were just so powerful. People were stacking multiple familiars. You still can stack them. You can get 0 to 3 Genestealer ones and 0 to 2 Chaos ones as well. So they do stack, but very, very powerful. Even with the house rule at 25 credits, they are very, very powerful indeed. The next one we're going to talk about is the Carriatid. Now this is a flying blue baby. It's a kind of weird underhive monster. No one really knows about them. They're kind of Xenos species, I believe. But these things are quite similar. They're slightly faster moving than the familiars themselves. They're also fly as well, instead of just being on the ground. Now, the only way that you can get a Carriatid, and you can only have one of them as well, and it can only be your leader, they're rare 15. So if you have the high enough rep to get one, then you get them randomly if you're very lucky, but you can't buy them at all. You have to see if you get them, if you're lucky enough to get them. But they also have Omen of Fortune. Again, the same rule as the Chaos Familiar and the Genestealer Cult Familiar, and the same rules with their armor saves as well. Now they're a symbol of renown, so if you do have one, you get +1 reputation while it accompanies the leader, and -2 reputation if killed or abandoning its companion. Which brings me on to the next rule, which is abandonment. When reputation is reduced for any reason, roll a d6 and subtract the number of reputation lost from the result. If the total is 1 or less, the Carriatid will abandon its companion. A roll of 6 before modifiers is always a success. The Carriatid is not purchased like other items of war gear. Instead, one may decide of its own volition to make a companion of a gang leader or not. If the result is a 15 for the seek rare equipment during the post-battle sequence, there's a chance that a Carriatid will attach itself to the leader. Roll 2d6 and add the reputation. If the result is 20 or higher, a Carriatid has decided to form a bond with the leader. Pretty cool, really fluffy, really fun, and who doesn't like flying blue babies? The next one, and we're getting towards the end now, is the Grapple Hawk. Now this one is similar to your Sheenbird, but slightly better. These are available to anybody and they are illegal, so you get them at the black market trading post and they cost 90 credits. Now they're pretty fast with movement 8, they fly. They've only got low strength though, but average toughness, average wounds, with 2 attacks though, and poor mental stats. And these guys of course fly as well. Now they've got one special rule called Grapple. So if hitting a fighter with Talons, automatically hit the same fighter in subsequent activations and reaction attacks. These automatic hits trigger bonuses for Disarm and Entangle. Pretty cool. So they're really annoying once they get stuck in combat with you. If you can't finish them off, they can be really, very, very annoying indeed. And they're independent as well. They must try to remain within 9 inches of the owner instead of 3. So again, similar to the Fur Cat actually, or Fear Cat. They must remain within 9 inches of the owner there as well. So pretty good, but for 90 credits, far too expensive if you ask me. I like the speed of them and they are very annoying at tying fighters up, but they will get killed pretty easily with only toughness 3 and no saves there as well. The next one, the last one, my favourite one, is the Wasteland Giant Rat. Sorry, not the Wasteland Giant Rat, that's part of the Beastmaster, but this is just the Necromundan Giant Rat. These guys are 50 credits and they're common, so you can get them at any time, pretty much, from the trading post. They have average stats, they're kind of like an average fighter, but they've got movement 6, which is pretty cool. They're stealthy, so they're -1 to hit by ranged attacks. They are a small target, so they're never potential for stray shots. They're nimble, so they've got a 4+ unmodifiable AP, unmodifiable save in general, which is pretty cool. And they've also got Rat Cunning as well, so the owner gets a 5+ bonus save against environmental damage. Alternatively, the owner may sacrifice the giant rat to completely ignore damage taken from an environmental effect. The giant rat is permanently removed. So that's the giant rat. I really like it for 50 credits. I think it's quite useful. The fact that it's got an invuln save is really good. And I used to have a pet rat as a kid and I really loved it. I love rats in general, and it's definitely my favourite pet out of the bunch so far, just really for fluff reasons, I'd say. Anyway, I'm going to go back through them now and start ranking them, I think, just off the cuff, really. We can start with Sheenbirds. I think what I said with the Sheenbirds, I'm going to give it a D. I don't think they're particularly useful, especially for 90 credits. I think they're way too expensive. Half that, they might be useful. Otherwise, yeah, I don't really like them myself. The next one is the Cephalopod Spectre. Again, for 100 credits, I just, I don't think they are worth it at all. 50 credits, maybe, sure. I'm going to give the Cephalopod Spectre a D+, purely because they have the shock trait and they are quite good. If you are opening loot crates and stuff, like you are in our campaigns, we have components crates and things like that. They can be quite useful for that too. So I'll give the Spectre a slightly higher grade than the Sheenbird, I think. The next one is the Cherub Servitor. Now, the Cherub Servitor clearly isn't as good as the Familiars. However, it's still very, very powerful. And at 55 credits, I think that's probably about right. I think the Familiars should probably be that price. But I'm going to give the Cherub Servitor a B. I think they're really, really strong. Of course, they're only available for Redemptionists and stuff, but they're really, really good. I like them a lot. The next one is the Psychotheric Worm. 70 credits. It is quite expensive for what they do, but they are essential for running Psychotheric Delat gangs properly, if you ask me. I would say they're an essential item for a Psychotheric Delat gang. You don't have to run Delat gangs as Psychotheric, but if you're going to want to use one of these. They're very, very important, so I'm going to give that a B+. A B+ for the Psychotheric Worm. The Sump Croc, the Goliath one there, I think it's the toughest of all the pets. It's almost verging on brute territory really, with 2 wounds as well, but for 130 credits it's decent, but does it add anything to your Goliath gang? Not really, so I'm going to give that one a C. Next one is the Fur Cat. This is Escher's slightly bigger pet. Now again, very similar to the Sump Croc. It's not as survivable, but can dish out a lot of damage with those claws. It's also very fast, and the fact that it can be 9 inches away, I'm also going to give it a B. I think the Fur Cat is a good option. The next one is the Felix Cat. 50 credits. To buy them at 50 credits, I don't think they're that great. They're okay, but I'd rather buy a little sister with a stiletto knife and a las pistol or something instead. It's cheaper, it's better, it's more effective. So for me, I'm going to give the Felix Cat like a C-, but they are quite good at screening. Like I said, use the tactics card that gives you a free ones. That's just better. It's more betterer. The Durinx Cat is the next one, and the Durinx Cat is a psychic cat. I think if you get lucky and you get those particular psychic powers that I mentioned, great. But there are only 2 and 6 that I really think are that powerful. And for 120 credits, that's a lot. However, you can get them free from certain rackets and stuff as well, which is pretty cool. But the Durinx Cat, as is, I think for 120 credits, is not all that good, really. So I'm going to give that one a C-. The next one is the Cyber Agnet, and that's the Van Saar one with 75 credits and a web gun. I am going to give that one an A. I do think it's that powerful. Sure, the web projector is only strength 2, but having a clambering little annoying fuck who also induces fear and can't be captured, he's really, really annoying. Movement 6 and a web projector, very nasty indeed. He's going to get a straight A for me, the Cyber Agnet. The next one's the Cyber Mastiff. So again, like I said, 100 credits is a complete rip-off. 50 credits, and I would say it was good. But 100 credits, they're just not worth it, if you ask me. They look cool, and it's such a shame because I really do want to take them on my Orlok gangs, but you know, 100 credits is just too much. 50 credits, and I would take them, so I'm going to give them a D as well. The Hacked Cyber Mastiff gets an F because it's like a Cyber Mastiff, but much worse with that Insanity as well. So that's the worst one so far out of all the exotic beasts. The Hard Case Cyber Mastiff, however, at 70 credits, I'm going to give a A-. I think it's really, really good, but it's not quite as good as the... Actually, no, let's give it a B. Let's give it a B. Otherwise, I'm putting it above something else that... yeah, let's not. Let's give it a B. Hard Case Cyber Mastiff has a B. It's pretty good. Really, really good, especially with the higher toughness and the 2 attacks as well. Really useful. Now, for the familiars, though. The Psychic Familiar and the Chaos Familiar are more or less the same, so I'm going to give those an A*. I think they're a bit broken, rules as written, but rules as intended, they're also pretty broken, to be honest. At 25 credits, they're far too cheap. They should be around the price of the Cherub, if you ask me. And they're still better than the Cherub, even at that, because you just ignore the hits. So both of those just get an A*. They're just fantastically good. The Carriatid as well is also excellent, but not quite as good actually, because they can disappear and stuff, so maybe an A for the Carriatid. Of course, we've got the Grapple Hawk as well. Grapple Hawk's a bit of a weird one. I can't really see myself using one at 90 credits, to be honest. I'm also going to give them the same as the Sheenbird with a D. I just don't think they're particularly strong. However, they've got better special rules, so maybe we'll give them a D+ there as well. And the last one, the Giant Rat. Giant Rat's pretty good. You know, having that -1 to hit. They've got a 4+ invuln. They're pretty useful at 50 credits. I think they're worth taking. They're annoying. They're actually a really good pet. I'm going to give the Giant Rat a B+ because I really like them. And that's that. I hope you enjoyed that anyway. Sorry I was rambling too much with that, but I get into these subjects and I just go off on one. But I've been meaning to do a video on exotic beasts for quite a while now. So I'm glad I got it out of the way for you. Again, I didn't talk about the Beastmaster because I've done that in a previous video as a hangers-on sort of thing. But we'll come back to that at some other point. The Beastmaster is slightly different in that the exotic beasts you get are just exclusively for him. Anyway, please like, share, subscribe, and I'll be back with another episode of Sump Banter real soon. Peace out.